How's everyone doing today, guys?
Good, good. How are
What's
you?
up? Good.
How are
Excited
you?
to be here.
Yeah. Welcome. I'm gonna wait a minute here as we get the room. I don't know if anybody can see an actual number. I can't, but welcome to this online talk, this webinar with Allbirds, Aditi Mayer and Jeff Staple. My name is Jeff Carvalho. I'm an editor, longtime editor at Highsnobiety, and a fan of culture for those that don't know the work that we do at High Snob. And one of the things that's really amazing about the work that we do is that we're able to cover a wide breadth of things. A lot of people think that the majority of what we do is covering, only the cool guy stuff, but really what we're looking at is how the world's changing today more than ever, and trying to put focus on the good things that are out there, really trying to make a change. And with the work that we have done with Allbirds through Waves of Change, it's our way of actually giving recognition to a variety of people within the fashion world, within the production world, and that are doing good, that are doing their part to have an impact on what's happening. But of course, one of the leaders in that space, certainly within footwear, is Allbirds, and that's why we're here. Tim Brown, co-founder of Allbirds, is joining us here. Tim, before we throw it to our guests, and I'll give introductions in a second, give these folks an idea, for those that may not be familiar, of where Allbirds came from, really quickly and short, so that we can get into the meats of it. But what was the onus for you getting into this?
Yeah, thanks guys. We're thrilled to be here. Yeah, we are nearly 5 years old. We're a team of nearly 500 people, offices around the world, headquarters in San Francisco, 22 retail stores. We've come a long way in a short time, but I would like to sort of, I really call this a bad idea for a long time before it was a good one. I probably started working on it back in 2008. I was playing sport for a living at the time, sponsored by one of the big sportswear companies, and that shall not be named. And really started to imagine, a different type of brand with a different design ethos that was about singular expressions of form and different types of materials, and started working on that. And I had teammates at the time that laughed at me, many people that laughed at me for a long period of time, stuck with it for 7 years, went through hundreds and hundreds of prototypes, found factories on Google, made every mistake that you could possibly imagine, and ultimately launched the business that the product that would become Allbirds on Kickstarter in 2014. So it's been a long journey, and along the way actually met Jeff Staple around that time in 2014. So very, very humbled to be here, and excited to sort of share a little bit more around our mission and purpose.
Thank you. And one of the great things that you guys do as well is the Allgood Collective, which is an ambassadorship where you're out there really looking for the next group of leaders that are trying to make impact locally within their communities. And Aditi Mayer joins us here on this. Aditi, I'd love to hear a little bit of your story before we get to Jeff and the shoes, because of course, what we can all do within our own space and within our, more than ever in this, mine would be my own pod today in the times that we're in, is important. I'd love to hear it, Aditi.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for having me. I had my start in the sustainable fashion world about 7 years ago after learning about the Rana Plaza factory collapse, which was an 8-story garment factory producing out of Bangladesh. And at that time, I think my relationship with fashion kind of pivoted from retail therapy to arbitrary notions of what was in, to a deeper exploration of the politics of labor, to fashion's impact on the environment and culture. And so that was the start of my college career at the same time. So I guess throughout the next 4 years, it became this journey of understanding sustainability as a culture. What does that mean in practice? And so now my work spans everything from working with sustainable fashion brands on a content creating and consulting capacity. I'm also a photojournalist exploring topics of labor and the environment. A lot of my work recently has been with the garment worker community here in Los Angeles. And as far as next steps, I'm excited to be a National Geographic Fellow next year and spend a year tracing.
Congratulations.
Thank you. The fashion supply chain in India. So, long story short, I guess my work just explores those intersections between style, sustainability, and
Yeah.
social justice.
It's great to have your voice here and helping get those stories out. And congratulations on the Nat Geo work. I'm really excited to see that. And of course, finally, Jeff Staple, you're joining us. Somebody that understands voice probably better than most. Jeff's been a creative in the culture space for the better part of, can I say 3 decades now, Jeff, or is it still 2?
Not quite yet. Don't go there yet, Jeff.
Okay, we'll keep it there.
2.5.
It's been really fun. My journey through my own work has been really fun. Having Jeff there and watching his journey. Certainly, he's been and seen a lot. Jeff, I really want to start with you. You know, the worlds that you and I are traditionally operate in. You know, the worlds of, let's call it cool. The idea of sustainability or any sort of other questions around the cool was something that was never talked about. And certainly within fashion to some extent, there were conversations you didn't have. Love to get your take on, this accountability moment now that's hitting us.
Yeah.
I believe it may have a lot to do with what's going on, not only in the environment and certainly with the fact that we've all been home and having a lot more time, but I'd love to get your take on what that means today.
Yeah, I think it's a reckoning that now we're all about to have to answer. And to your point, being fly, cool, limited edition, hyped, like our whole entire culture is really only about, like you said, 2-3 decades old. So, and the other thing is, none of us are, I'm trying to say this like with respect to all of my peers in the industry, like none of us came up with like MBAs and PhDs. Like we're all like rugrats, just trying to figure this crap out as we go along. And it's shocking that 3 decades later, this is like $1 billion industry all in. Like you and I go way back, 2 decades plus, when we were all just running around renegading at trade shows trying to figure this out. And none of us, even the people who were killing it back then, would have thought that we would be here still today having this. We were just like going day by day. So we were always playing this game of like figuring it out and playing catch up. All the while, all of us knew what was happening from an environmental standpoint and politically as well. And now in 2020, I think we are at this point where like I said, it's become a point of reckoning where like we do have to account for the things that we're doing. And I will say the culture is better at most in terms of the fashion landscape, like, because the things that we make are inherently almost like heirlooms. Like I have like Fat Farm and like 555 Soul pieces from like 1999. Like I'm keeping them. This is not like fast fashion. These are heirloom products. But when I got to sit down with Tim a couple, like maybe a little bit over a year ago, and the words that he said to me were so poignant. He just said like, you're going to have to ask yourself in the mirror one day what side of history you want to be on. And I was like, damn, Tim. I was like, damn, like you just like,
that's heavy.
It's true. It's heavy. Like, I don't want to be on my deathbed being like, I made the coolest stuff that kids pay resale for. Like,
sure.
While the icebergs are crumbling around me and animals are dying left and right. Like, that's what I want to go down as. So, I'm always interested in projects now that just sort of like tweak the methodology. And I also think a lot of people in my industry are sort of like burdened with this idea that I have a business, I have things, I have this like, employees and everything, and I can't change on a dime and change the world. It'll disrupt my whole entire way of living. But I think what Tim is doing and what Aditi is doing is trying to say like, it's not about stop on a dime, go in reverse and change your whole life. It's just pivot. And eventually, there'll be a tipping point.
Yeah, one question I want to throw to all of you before we really get into it, and it's a question I think a conversation I certainly have had with Tim, but this idea of being responsibility for sustainability, or can I ask, are they the same thing? Do they live within the same sphere? And I'd love to just, for those that may not have a full understanding of what sustainability may mean today, in very simple terms, Tim and Aditi, what can that look like?
I think one of the challenges we have is defining that. It's such a complicated problem. And I think, Jeff, that's so well said. I mean, one of the challenges at Allbirds, we kind of, my partner, Joey, came in and he's like, look, climate change is the problem of our generation. We need to find better ways to make the products and services we love, like full stop. And in the next 4 to 5 years, there is going to be an upheaval in business, and this is going to change. And I was like, okay, I really want to be a part of that. And we started working at Allbirds with sustainability as our North Star. But the obvious question was, what is sustainability? And the problem is like, is it microplastics? Is it fair trade labor? Is it air quality? Is it water quality? Is it animal welfare? Is it?
There's a lot there.
And the short answer is it's all of those things. But where we've landed as a business is it's got to ladder up to this North Star around carbon footprints, that there is a global carbon footprint we must reduce and individual carbon footprints that we've got to manage. And that sustainability is often a byword for all the things that you should stop doing. And really the opportunity here is to think about it as an innovation opportunity, that there will be disruption in different industries and categories. And rather than the thing you do at the end, it's the thing you should be thinking about at the beginning, particularly if you're a young entrepreneur, a new creator, because there's a whole world of possibility and opportunity here on the business landscape for those that get this right.
Got it. Aditi, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked this question, because I feel like responsibility, sustainability, there's so many buzzwords that kind of frame this moment right now. When I think of responsibility, I think there's a lot of conversations that need to be had about whose responsibility is it amid this like critical juncture of people on the planet, right? For a long time, I think the narrative was putting all of the onus on the consumer. Figure out what's the most sustainable brand and like shop with your values in mind. But I think we also need to reckon that brands have to lead this charge. Brands, because of their scale and their influence on consumers, are a large player when it comes to this playing field of sustainability and whose responsibility is it. As far as sustainability, I think sustainability by definition is trying to sustain a certain system at a current rate, right? And so I think we always have to question the type of system we are trying to sustain. And sustainability at its finest, I think, is about the interrogation of these systems. And so one thing I'm really excited to kind of explore, as I said, is sustainability as a culture. And I think that's where the streetwear conversation has a lot of overlap, because historically, streetwear was about challenging the norm. It was about DIY and kind of challenging this hierarchical institution that was for the select few. So I think there's a lot to learn between those two worlds as well.
Jeff, on Aditi's point. Oh, sorry, go ahead, please.
I wanted to add one point to that, which was like,
please.
I think everyone knows that there's a problem and everyone knows that we need a solution. But I think human nature says, like, what is the cure for this? I want to take that pill. I want to fire that bullet. And what they don't realize is that the answer is actually evolutionary. It's like the iPhone. There's like version 1, 1.2, 1.3. And like, if everyone just stands around and says like, I'm going to sit back until the answer is solved, and then I will use that answer, we're not going to get anywhere. We got to start the ball rolling.
That's not moving things forward. And I think that iPhone analogy makes a lot of sense. And if I can, Jeff, building off of that, the culture of style for sure has looked at revisions, right? I mean, you look at a lot of the shoes is always revisions. Certainly the work that you've done, there's been revisions. But what's important now with the work that you're doing with Allbirds is the platform that you're using, in my opinion, as well, right? So you're taking on something pretty amazing in being able to use the work that Tim and his team have into being able to develop these textiles. Love to get your take on how much of that went into your thinking as well.
Oh, a ton. I mean, secretly, I went into this sort of thinking like a hacker, what happens if we put this number that shows the carbon footprint big on the outside? Honestly, I don't know what's going to happen, but I think.
And Jeff, what is that number? What is that number?
Yeah, I have an example here. So this is the inline, the one that released a couple of days ago. And normally, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, but under the footbed is where you put, like, usually under here, you put a 9.2, which is the carbon footprint number of the product that you're making, right?
Yeah, like calories on the back of a packaging of food. It's like, this is environmental impact.
Yeah.
Greater than zero, and that's not good.
And then in some of the early design stages, I was like, how about we stamp that number big on the side of the shoe where a logo would normally be? This is a very normal place for a brand logo to fly their flag. I want to fly this flag here now. Like, I'm just wondering what you guys felt at Allbirds. Were you like a
Well,
little scared of it, or?
I think the insight that you have is like, okay, well, if that object, that pair of shoes is 9.2, it stands true that every single other object that I interact with and use and invest in, purchase, throw away also has a number. And like, that's a really simple thing, but like you start thinking in those terms and you realize that that number is made up of like a series of decisions. It opens up a whole kind of creative world. And I think for me, to your earlier question, moderator Jeff, is this idea that you start to sort of have a bit of a framework for how you can evaluate what's good and what's less good. And that's really helpful.
Yeah. I mean, my dream would be that the next iteration of this has 8.9 on the side.
Right.
Because we were able to like tweak something, you know? And going into your question about connecting the culture of the innovation of sustainability with the culture of fashion and exclusivity, to me, it's like, here, like this shoe just came out. It's now the first time Allbirds is on StockX. What does that do for the planet? On surface level, absolutely nothing. But when you now have $1 billion industry in resale and millions of people who are now like, yo, I'm copping Allbirds because there's a resale value. That's a very sort of like capitalistic base need. But what does that do for the business now? What does that do for the factories that are making sweet foam? What are, you know, the butterfly effect of all of that happening? Again, I don't exactly know what is going to be the result of it, but I do think it's going to be positive for everyone involved.
Yeah. Aditi, thoughts on that? In carrying that flag, and now, you know, you're starting to put product into the cool grinder in some way, and I'd love to get your take on that.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, if you think about it, when it comes to streetwear, it's been the cultural relevance that has framed it, right? Not necessarily material sustainability or the labor behind it. And so the marriage of those two worlds is really key, because as someone that has been in the sustainability space for the last 7 years, there's always been this tension between ethics and aesthetics. Like if you think about the mainstream understanding of what sustainable fashion elicited, it was like Topanga Canyon, like white dresses in a prairie field, like something like that, which is fine and good. But I think we also need to expand our understanding of what sustainable fashion captures. And I think these sorts of collaborations can be that touch point for folks to introduce themselves to this concept, given that sustainability is such wide, distant abstractions a lot of the time. So something as critical as like a carbon footprint can really be that, you know, gateway for folks to understand their impact as well.
I think it's so well said. And Jeff, if I could just add one thing, like,
please.
At the end of the day, the sustainability conversation is about transport and renewable energy and complex systems that are well beyond streetwear and well beyond the idea that we make a shoe from 9.2, that, you know, we make one that's, you know, 8.9 that we're winning. These things are complicated. But what I do know is it's the artists, the creators that take complex problems and storytell and take creative risks to make the complicated things simple. And there is also, you know, a very, very important sort of underpinning of this, that the sustainability problem isn't a rich people problem that that is only for a few, it's for everyone. And we are all in this together, and the ability to sort of come together around this problem to sort of work our way out of it is super important. And I just think the storytellers have got a real role to play when it comes to sort of engaging and sparking that revolution.
Yeah. Right. Can I add one thing? Like 6 months ago, as we were rolling this out, I was telling a good friend of mine all about this project and the carbon footprint number and like sustainably made, plant-based, the whole, you know, the wools. I was like just really excited. And his response was so poignant because it stabbed me in the heart. He just said like, Jeff, that's all great as long as it's dope. And I was like, oh shit, yeah, it's got to be dope too. Like, it doesn't matter if you make this stuff and there's 2,000, 3,000 shoes sitting in a warehouse because no one wants them. I was like, you're so right.
The climate change conversation doesn't need another documentary. It needs Tiger King. It needs cultural connection. It needs understanding, and it needs relevance, not just to a few, but to a lot of people. And that's what's so exciting about this conversation and this project is, you know, Jeff's taking that number, that piece of science, and he's going, that's the story. Let's make it big. Let's turn the shoe inside out. Let's question, look at things differently. And there's power in those collisions.
And there's definitely, you know, there's sort of this informa that happens between both sides, right? Where, you know, what I love hearing from you, Tim, and the energy that that I feel from it is that you're almost asking, you're like, listen, we've got this to offer, let's see what we can do from the creative side to make this hit. And listen, your shoe is hitting, there's no doubt about it, but it's great that we're starting to see more creatives come into the Allbirds family in helping to tell that story. Because at the end of the day, as to Aditi's point, the work she does, it's going to take a community of people coming together to do this.
Well, let's look at the moment that we're in at the moment, right? We're in this pandemic, a problem that hasn't respected traditional borders, boundaries, or this has been a problem, a universal problem.
Class.
It hasn't, right? It hasn't shown that respect. People obviously have been impacted differently. That's another conversation. But we look forward to kind of climate change and the global cooperation that's going to be needed. We got to rewrite the rules. I mean, we launched the material, we made it open source. We're working with Adidas. Traditionally in footwear, like, competitors don't work together, and in the case of sort of our world, which is the antithesis of sort of the streetwear community, where we're making singular products that are available for everyone. And there's the streetwear world, which is fascinating. I have such enormous respect for, which is about small runs of very selective things that very few people can get. And the collision of these things, we need more of that. And I think more appreciation of different points of view with a singular sort of mission. And I think that's what's been great about this particular partnership.
Yeah, that's great. Jeff, I know you've got a sneak peek of some other shoes, some other things we want to look at. But before we go there, we got a question. I'd love to throw it to the audience here from one of the viewers. Is there any metric setup that would measure or evaluate the success of the project in terms of awareness and even in lowering climate impact? I think one thing that's really measurable, of course, is that carbon number, Jeff.
Yeah, my KPI for success for this was really conservative, because I know our consumer, as you do, Jeff, is very, very fickle and
Sure.
very brand loyal in both directions.
Yeah.
Like, if you're not in the conversation, it's very hard to get in the conversation. And trust me, I was extremely cognizant of that going into this collaboration. And I thought it might have been an uphill battle to convince this very fickle, customer to be like, give this a look. So I was like, if I could just get one kid to like understand what Allbirds is doing out of the entire streetwear community, I'm so happy.
Sure.
But
if I can, Jeff, for a quick second, I think you're underselling that community too. The work that we've done has shown that, these, being sustainable or thinking about that's a table stake in the sense that even looking good is too. So, I have faith that those kids out there are starting to pay attention to these things.
Yeah, what you guys have been doing at Highsnob, honestly, and I've told you this on the side, like this past year, you guys have rewritten what you're supposed to be writing about, and I applaud you guys for that, for sure. Yeah, but yeah, it's just, these, you look at my comments feed and it's like the peanut gallery, right? And I just like, I do a post and I just like put a bag over my head and I'm just like, all right, don't show me the comments for 5 days. But I looked and I was like, wow, the vast majority here is really, really positive of everything that we're doing, the way it looks, Allbirds, the collaboration and the partnership. It's really amazing. So I think people are really getting to it. That's my KPI. I could answer that from like a consumer feel good story, but Tim and Aditi, maybe you can answer more of like the environmental KPI.
Well, I just know that one of the requirements of doing this was that Staple Design was going to be carbon neutral, and that you were going to, offset your business.
That's right.
That's great. That's great.
Yep.
Which was sort of what does that mean, and what's the actual like process for doing that? So, I mean, I think in really simple terms, anyone who's involved in business today needs to understand their carbon footprint. Then they need to be working and innovating to drive that number down. If you can't improve it unless you measure it. And then you want to use certified offsets in the short term as a bridge towards getting where you need to get to. And the fact that, that you guys are doing that, I think is one of the great outcomes. And to your point, like, I mean, I think, what is a carbon number? You start applying that to the next time you go shopping, to the objects that surround you. You start to ask those questions. You start to understand it's a lot about materials. It's all about manufacturing. It's all about transport. It's about packaging. It's about end of life. And if we can arm you with the questions, then you can get busy finding the best answers and holding brands, yourself and other people accountable. So we were never sort of setting this up as, is all the answers. I mean, look, at the end of the day, we've got a number on that product that's 9.2 kilograms higher than it needs to be to ultimately get where we need to go. But I do think the power in knowing what the questions are is a super important step on this journey. And I feel like this project sort of put a spotlight on that.
Jeff, I know you got the shoes. I'd love to take a look at some of those special colorways just to keep.
I think in 48 hours, we've got a second drop, which is right here. This is the sky blue version. You can't do an Allbirds Pigeon collaboration without referencing the sky. And then, as we have in the original one too, we have the sky pattern sort of in the sock liner. And this is really, kudos to the Allbirds development team for working with us and trying all the different iterations that we got. And, you could see the difference between the OG and then the sky blue. And, one is sort of much more, I would say, everyday wearable. The other one is much more sort of impactful. But then working with us on drop cadence, quantities. So this one is actually going to be an Allbirds app exclusive. And this drops in 48 hours, I believe, on the 17th at 11 a.m. Eastern. And again, just kind of like bringing in that sort of street culture, Easter egg hunting kind of mentality. Like, oh, you got the app version. Oh, you got the original version. And who knows, maybe we got a couple more Easter eggs coming soon.
Thanks for that. And sorry, we're going to mention that again at the end of the cast, but that's on the app. So you can just pull that up, I think, by just looking at Allbirds in the App Store.
Yep.
Correct. Cool. Aditi, let's take this a little bit farther. Again, looking at the individual and thinking about the work that you're doing, and certainly the work you're doing next year with Nat Geo in documenting. The average person here maybe in the West, it doesn't think about the factory as much. Certainly, we think about that factory when we see it in the news, and the devastation that is caused by just shitty construction and really not being able to follow protocols are important just for the average employee. How do we get more of that? Of course, through the work you've done with your photography in next year, but how do you get the West to pay more attention to that? Because certainly there are factories today that are converting over. There are factories that are bettering their process and certainly doing their best to change the system. But to the point around iteration and certainly versions, we're not there yet, are we?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think the main project of fast fashion in many ways has been desensitizing the consumer from the source and also our personal identity when it comes to fashion. Where I think streetwear has a lot of work where it's done, where it's historically been rooted in DIY or counterculture, right? And so if we think about the impacts that fast fashion had on consumer psyche, it's about not really questioning what the source is, it's about mindless consumption. So when it comes to where do we go from here, there's a few steps I always say that requires us to reach the next level of consciousness when it comes to consumerism. I think one, we touched on it, you have to lead with product. If the aesthetics are not there, it's not going to do much. I think two, material sustainability is so important, right? We really need to pivot from petroleum-based products. The fact that fossil fuels still contribute a lot to the fashion landscape, seeing fashion as a product of agriculture, which is something that Allbirds does as well. It's about consumer narratives. And I think that's where brands really have a lot that they can do when it comes to going beyond just mindless consumption, but the storytelling around a product and marketing. I'm also a big fan of open source knowledge, which Tammy touched on a bit, whether it's the partnership with Adidas or the fact that Allbirds created Sweet Foam, which is like a sugarcane based green foam product. And then I also think we also need to interrogate the speed of production. When it comes to fashion being predicated on the cycle of speed is what results in the lack of garment worker rights and the environment a lot of the times. And so I think that's another opportunity where streetwear culture has been rooted a lot in limited drops, heirlooms, as Jeff has said. And I think that has to frame the future of fashion as well. And all of that goes back into personal style a lot of the time. When you're not kind of motivated by arbitrary trends and needing the next best thing all the time. I think that's going to shift a lot of, where the youth is right now too. Consumer culture and Gen Z, there's so much that we can talk about with that. I was on TikTok the other day and there's a trending hashtag of retail made me do blank. And there's so many youth talking about how their jobs at retailers made them burn product, making sure that they have this false idea of being a high-end product or not getting it in the hands of folks they don't want it to be. So there's this elevating consciousness also on class and accessibility. We've seen the rise of thrifting and like one-off culture. So all of those things kind of point to what the youth is thinking about. And I think brands really need to catch up to that and really push that narrative in a lot of ways.
I think that's a really thoughtful answer too, in the sense that it's a really easy knee-jerk reaction, Jeff, to sort of like assume that consumption is bad, all consumption is bad, and that's an easy thing to get your head around. We're just going to, all fast fashion is bad, and we're going to stop buying stuff. And the reality is that's not what's going to happen. We're going to continue to consume, and the answer is in consuming more thoughtfully and in businesses and brands making products that have close to zero or net zero environmental impact, and incrementally making improvements in an urgent sort of way towards solving that problem. And I think it's not the answer to your point. People want a silver bullet on this, and they want quick answers. There's nothing quick about this. And what we've sort of found is that the answer is most likely not going to be found in discounted fast fashion that turns quickly. It's going to be found in long-term innovation that takes time, that is bringing new natural materials to market in different ways. It's about stories that connect with the communities that drive influence. It's about education, a bunch of the stuff that, that is not easy. And it's something that we have to kind of commit collectively to. And, I think this type of conversation is emblematic of that. It's talking about a lot of little things that need to come together.
I mean, it happened a little over 10 years ago, if you remember, where, the FDA said all eateries have to put their calories next to their food now. And everyone was like, oh, it's over for Burger King and McDonald's. Like, they're done. The fact is they're not done. What they've done is there's now 7 salads that you could get at McDonald's because the consumer has spoken like, oh, wow, there's that much in that. Well, I'm going to go to this place and get and wait, don't leave us. We'll make salad. And that's what I'm hoping this happens, is like, once everyone opens the kimono and shows what they've got, people are going to be pressured in a good way to do better. Oh, you're muted, Jeff.
Oh, sorry. I've been muted for a long time there. Sorry about that, guys.
Billy, was the best section of the
it
call,
was
right?
Absolutely. I had a visit from my son. I had to take a moment. But building off of Jeff, what you just said, we have a question here from our audience, and this one's to Tim or Jeff Staple. Can you speak on the importance of integrating sustainable materials in manufacturing into the way sportswear companies solve problems for athletes, rather than saying sustainability is a problem to be solved? I'd love your take on that, guys. It's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of ways to answer that. I mean, I think, one of the big insights we had early on is people don't want to buy sustainable products. That's not what they want to buy great products. And, we started off with that mantra kind of, 4 or 5 years ago. And it was like, we were never going to sacrifice on quality to, put, a sustainable thing into market that was going to perform less well. I think that's to the detriment of this conversation, right? In the same way, like with organic food, sometimes the assumption was not that long ago that organic food was for rich people, had dirt on it and tasted less good. Now it's become synonymous with quality. It's a mainstream idea. You find organic food in Walmart. So, the trick, I think one of the important things about sustainability is you think about it as synonymous with innovation. I think where we've landed as a business now, our product can't be great unless it is also sustainable. Unless you're at least on the journey to thinking about the environmental impact of the product that you're making, you can't consider it great. So the conversation's moved, but I think when you come to athletes and performance, you run into excuses. And we were told for a long time, you can't make a running shoe because that's where, like, hey, that's when you got to get serious, and like sustainability, you can't do it. It's too hard. And like we went in, and over 3 or 4 years we worked on it and we solved it, and we really were able to bring materials that traditionally were kept out of performance footwear when we introduced that in our Dasher product. So all of these problems are solvable if you commit to them. That's what we've sort of found. And if you you truly make this purpose a non-negotiable in the way that you operate and in the way that you make products, you can solve problems for athletes, you can solve problems for everyday people, you can solve big problems, you can solve small problems. It's all just about a mindset. You know, if we can put a man on the moon, we can find a way to make net zero carbon impact.
Yeah.
Sneakers. Like, I'm telling you that.
I mean, that man on the moon thing really, you know, it sticks to me, because, you know, how the hell do you get to the moon, but yet we still can't figure out how to fix some things here? And I'll argue all day that it's a mindset. It's not just one product. It's going to take a lot more, and I think that actually speaks to a lot of the work that we're doing here.
And then
one more question.
The aspect of, like,
go ahead, Jeff.
If I can just add that, you know,
Please.
The aspect of desirability. You know, you look at success stories like, you know, Beyond Burger, which I personally like. Given a choice of like a juicy beef hamburger or Beyond Burger, like I actually like Beyond Burger better. Like Tesla, like it's not, you're not sacrificing to buy a Tesla. It is actually like an incredible car, even compared to, you know, gasoline, diesel cars as well. So like those brands have really been able to do it. And I'm hoping that people see the same thing with these shoes. Like, these are just amazing shoes that I really want to cop. Yeah, it's great that they're doing good things. As Tim said, no one buys it strictly because it's sustainable. And I just think like our job, like when I say our, I mean Staples' job, is really to make sure that like we're not the R&D, we're not the technical innovators on the sustainability side, like my speakers on the stage here are. But I think our job is to make it so that it is sort of that desirability. You know, like this whole talk, I kept thinking of my friend Errolson, who does that brand Acronym. Acronym
Sure.
on face value is not a sustainable brand, but I have the Acronym J2 jacket V1 from 1999. I have the 2002 edition. It's hanging pristinely in my closet. So in fact, he is making a sustainable brand, because I'm going to pass that down for generations. You know, it just has to be, like I said, it has to be dope first and foremost.
Yeah, and we know that it has to look good. I'm going to pass it to Aditi, but before that, Tim, just building off what Jeff said, you know, and thinking about the next version of what, you know, the Allbirds product looks like. Any hints or any thoughts about where we should be thinking? I know I'm throwing you one off.
Can I throw one hint out, Tim?
Yeah, go, man. Go. Yeah.
There's a 7.1 on my chest.
Strong. Look, you know, it's super interesting. I mean, I just get a little like technical for a second, you know, and I think the Tesla is a really interesting example. There's a whole new innovation possibility, a whole new design language that is going to be born from considering carbon in the context of creating products. And I've sort of said this to you before, but traditionally when you think about designing and making a product, you think about three things. You think about what it looks like, you think about what it does, the utility of it, and you think about what it costs. Now you're bringing in this fourth constraint, this measurable number that you're going to place on the product that has all sorts of implications for the form. When you rethink, obviously the materials, what it's made of, but also the weight, whether it needs packaging, how it's used, how it's considered. And, you know, Allbirds is on that journey. Lots of other people, you know, smarter and better than us are going to pick that up. And that's why, you know, I just think one of the things sometimes I worry about with sustainability, it's like, oh, let's talk about all the things you shouldn't be doing. And accountability, transparency, measurability, all super important. But I'm telling you, like, for the entrepreneurs that are listening, like businesses, categories are going to get upended by new ways of doing things. This is a creative challenge as much of it as it is a policy one. It's a storytelling one as much as it is a science one. And that really excites me, I think, as a creator and a maker. And I just want to make sure that we think about sustainability as innovation as much as it is about measurement.
Great. Aditi, I got one last question for you. Here from those on the Zoom. Very few brands, if any, are perfect. How do we, all of us, balance progress over perfection with continuing to ask more from brands? What do you think people are looking from brands who are trying to do better? Aditi?
Yeah, I'm going to build off what Tim said about how sustainability is just as much about storytelling as a key component of it. I think for the longest time, brands, especially in the sustainability sector, have struggled with show, not tell. And this is when you have the rise of all these words, ethical, sustainable. No one knows what the hell it means for a lot of the time. So I think painting that story of what makes it sustainable, right? Really going into that. And it really goes beyond just those buzzwords at that point. And I think that's where education becomes the responsibility of a brand as well. I will say, I think there is a growing amount of cynicism online sometimes, especially with this anxiety of, climate change on the rise. But I think if brands are just explicit to say that they are on this journey, and they are still figuring stuff out, and making that a central point of their storytelling can go a really long way. And I know PR departments are get scared of that, because it's always like, oh, we have this all figured out, and that PR angle. But I think, in the age of hashtag sponsored and ad, people want that sense of transparency and relatability of how brands are figuring that stuff out. Because at the end of the day, everyone knows that sustainability is a journey, both on the individual and consumer level and on the brand level as well. And when it comes to fashion, which is an industry, historically speaking, in terms of fast fashion, that has been rooted in extraction and exploitation, having brands being a part of that discourse of reimagination and contraction in a lot of ways is so, so key.
Oops, sorry guys, I was muted again. Thank you for that, Aditi. I think that's about it. Guys, before we wrap it up, and this has been incredibly insightful call, and I appreciate the viewpoint you've all had. Certainly, I think the one big takeaway for me is that we're all part of this, and we all have to do it, not only from the creator side and production and fulfillment, but from from consumers and how they think about products. It's a journey that we're on, and to be honest, I think it's a journey that all of us should be committed to in continuing to push things forward. But before I go, guys, Jeff, again, give us a little bit more info on that drop, when it's happening, so people can keep an eye out.
Yeah, for sure. So this one came out a few days ago, and it's completely sold out. So StockX is the way to get this one, unfortunately. This one comes out on the, wait, hold up. I just had a mind fart. It is 17 in 2 days, 17th at 11 a.m. Allbirds app exclusive, the Pigeon sky blue colorway. And yeah, thanks a lot for supporting this, everyone. I love it.
Sure. Tim, any final thoughts here?
Just how impressive and articulate Aditi is, and how grateful we are to have the opportunity to hear from her and have her as part of our broader brand family. And this is about questions. It's not always about the answers, it's about questions. And if there's one thing you take away, it's like, go ask lots more of them and educate yourself. This is the problem of our generation. Allbirds is one tiny part of a much larger ecosystem. We're trying hard, a bunch of things we could be doing better. But let's start asking the questions. And I think that can be a powerful thing that can spread. And just really appreciate the time to both the Jeffs. Thanks very much, man. It's always such a pleasure to learn from you guys, and always a pleasure. Sure.
And Aditi, before we go, where can people find you?
Yes, people can find me online at Aditi Mayer, ADITIMAYER, or my blog, which is addimay.com. First three letters of my first and last name. It was a very inventive name when I started it as a freshman in college.
and definitely check the allbirds.com page. There's a great video as part of a series that should be checked out with Aditi and a ton of other great people. To Tim, Aditi, and Jeff, thank you so much for your time, and everyone have a great night. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Cheers.